think I'm going to start at this point. Okay. So you ready? We are going to start now. All right.
Yes.
So greetings, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to our second episode of the panel discussion series on careers at the cutting edge of engineering, presented by the University of Southern California, the Viterbi School of Engineering. Today, we will talk about careers in biomedical engineering. Before we do that, I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists. And before I introduce them, let me go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Sudha Kumar. I'm the director of the USC Viterbi India office, and I'm based in Bangalore. So our first panelist is Dr. Michael Coo, who did his undergraduate studies in mechanical engineering from Imperial College, University of London. He obtained his MS and PhD from Harvard University. He's currently a professor of biomedical engineering and pediatrics at USC. He previously served as the department chair of the Biomedical Engineering Department at USC. Dr. Coo is a fellow of the IEEE, Biomedical Engineering Society, the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, and the International Academy of Medical and Biological Engineering. Dr. Coo's research focuses on disorders in cardiorespiratory control during sleep and their interactions with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. His distinguished resume is way longer than this, but in the interest of time, we really have to shorten it. Welcome, Michael. Our next panelist is part of the Trojan family and is an alumnus. Mr. Rinda Sama has more than 15 years of Class 3 medical device experience. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Axionics Modulation Technologies, a NASDAQ-listed medical device company. Prior to Axionics, Mr. Sama was the Director of Operations and Quality at Wessex Vascular Incorporated, which was acquired by Boston Scientific. He worked as the Director of Program Management and Site Lead at Boston Scientific. Mr. Sama holds a master's degree in biomedical engineering from the University of Southern California and an MBA from the University of California, Irvine. Rinda, welcome to the panel, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. Our third wonderful panelist is Candace House-Texera, Associate Dean, Corporate Engagement and Programs at USC Viterbi. Among the various other hats that she wears, she oversees the Engineering Career Center. She served as the USC Viterbi Indian Industry, she served on the USC Viterbi Industry Advisory Board, the Corporate Council, and was a lecturer for the Information Technology program at USC. She's currently pursuing her doctorate in policy planning and development at USC. Welcome, Candace. So thank you to all the panelists, both on my behalf and also of that of the audience. We're all delighted that you have been generous enough to spend time and share your thoughts today. So my first few questions are for Dr. Coo, and we can first talk about some basics so we have an understanding of the field itself. So Dr. Coo, what is biomedical engineering and what does it encompass? It just sounds so broad.
Well, biomedical engineering is broad indeed, and it is used to describe the field where you apply engineering principles and design principles to help you develop new diagnostics and therapeutic solutions to different kinds of diseases. Also, a lot of it is used for basic research to automate sequencing of genes and so on, the control and the robotics that are used in industry now for different kinds of drug development and so on. I mean, all that stuff can be encompassed under biomedical engineering. I think that's the distinction though, because some people think that biomedical engineering is biotechnology, which is also used quite often. But the distinction is that biotechnology is more geared towards using live organisms like microbes to develop new drugs or new medicines or new things for plants, for agriculture, and so on. So it's more of biochemistry and more biology. Whereas biomedical engineering, you do apply, you do have to be a people.
Okay, so I think we are having a little bit of connectivity issue, Dr. Koo. So perhaps what we will do is maybe go to the next question.
You're back.
Okay, now you're back, yes. Okay, go ahead.
I'll just say that in terms of the
okay, you're back.
A bit of a network connection issue.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we can hear you now.
So I was just saying that, okay, why don't you go ahead with your questions, Sudha?
Right. So actually you went ahead and started answering my second question was what is the difference between biotechnology and biomedical engineering? And that's great. So you mentioned that biotechnology was more about microbes and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that because we've had some students from India and China who came from biotechnology backgrounds, and I think when their preparation in terms of the math and the physics, engineering, that part was not so good. They had a harder time, in the classes, and so that's why I mentioned that. So if you're from an engineering background, then I don't think you will have any problems at all.
Okay. All right. So the next question goes to Rinda. So Rinda, Michael talked about all the various areas that cover biomedical engineering. But if you look at the various verticals, medical imaging, medical devices, prosthetics, neuroengineering, analytics, which would be the most number of jobs available now and in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So biomedical engineering overall is a very exciting field with a lot of innovation coming with technology improvements. While there are several verticals, they are not that separated from each other. As an example, one of the vertical is medical devices and implants. So if you are doing an implant, which is what I do at our company, we have an active implantable medical device that stimulates a specific nerve to control bladder and bowel function. Imaging is a very important requirement for that, because as products are implanted into patients and these patients age or they have other health conditions, patients have to go through CT scanning or ultrasound or MRI. So we, as a medical device manufacturer of an implant, need to make sure the product works when it is imaged. So it is, they go hand in hand. It's not like, okay, you just do imaging or you just pick one area. They're all integrated. If you're into prosthetics or any orthopedic implants, again, imaging becomes another important aspect. Same thing with neuroengineering. While the target area becomes neurospace, you still need to make sure it can be imaged appropriately, it can be analyzed appropriately. So they all go hand in hand. So for me personally, I mean, I enjoy therapeutic devices more than diagnostic devices, because it's not just diagnosis, but you get to treat a given health condition. But that doesn't mean that diagnostics are not exciting. There are a lot of new things coming even in diagnostic space.
Anyone who is interested in biomedical engineering, so if they have like a broad understanding of the area, they should be able to apply it to many of these different verticals.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, Michael, what are the kinds of research going on in biomedical engineering? And what is the most exciting research for you personally?
Okay, well, I mean, because of the broad range of areas that BME covers, at USC also we have a broad range of research projects going on. So let me just mention a couple, and then my own, I guess, because my own will be the exciting one for me. But anyway, so for example, we've had Dr. Humayun, who's developed a retinal prosthesis, and so that is an electrode array that's implanted into the back of the at the retina of the eye, and he's developed a company. He found a company that's commercializing it. And it's enabling some of the blind people to be able to see to some extent. People who have, age-related macro degeneration and so on. And then another one might be, for example, one of my colleagues is developing some labs on a chip kind of thing, where she takes tissue from the heart muscle, and so to better understand, the mechanisms for heart failure, and how you might, certain drugs might improve the heart muscle in those kinds of tissues. So in order to do that, she has to kind of grow tissue from cells, and then kind of be able to treat them with different kinds of drugs and with different kinds of mechanical or chemical stimulation to see how to respond, so that when you better understand the preparation, then you know what that lab on a chip can be used for, and to develop it further. So that's another thing. There are people who do like more computational diagnostic stuff, like myself. One of the things that I've been kind of very more concerned with nowadays is that in order to develop ways in which you can diagnose things in a more cost-effective manner, so to be able to diagnose things just because there are now a lot of wearable stuff that we have, wristwatches and stuff like that can detect the pulse and that kind of thing. So right now we're actually trying out to see, by putting on a wristband on patients who have sickle cell anemia, who have these very painful crises, the capillaries are blocked and they can get stroke and all kinds of things, whether or not the pulse wave that we detect from the wristband we put on can be used to kind of presage the occurrence of these kinds of attacks that happen. So that's very exciting to me, because a device like that can be used in developing countries, people who don't have that much wealth to spend on medical devices. So that's an important part for me to work in. Okay.
So, Michael, one of the things that I really like doing is watching science fiction. And so you see a lot of very, very interesting things which are in the field of biomedical engineering. So what is it going to happen for the future? What is it that we can hope to see in the future coming out of the field of biomedical engineering?
Well, I mean, I think if you watch those old episodes of Star Trek, many years ago, they had this kind of scanner thing that they put, and they said, this was this and that. I think we are not too far from that now already. I mean, with all these wireless kind of devices and things that are very miniaturized. So I think we have to reach like maybe halfway towards that kind of goal. So I think we are, as you mentioned, a lot of science fiction like things are happening in reality now. with the way that computer chips are being smaller and more powerful, and also we find more materials that can be used in the body, implanted, and so I think we're really getting there actually.
So bionics is not too far off, really?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Wonderful. What about you, Rinda? So what's happening in industry, and what kind of futuristic research is going on over there?
Yeah, so in academic research or nonprofit research, there are mostly looking at the problems of tomorrow or solutions for tomorrow. And being in the industry, we have a bit of interest in getting revenue. So we are looking at problems of today. So the three areas that we currently that I see as a very high focus and high energy and high dollar amount that are spent in our industry or in wearables is one space. Unlike 10 years ago, now your cell phone has a lot more processing power, a lot more battery, and a lot more capability in terms of processing information. So we are all looking at how do we optimize this and get more diagnostic information out of it. The second area is cybersecurity. As we are making more and more devices that are connected, we want, one of the biggest concern is how secure are these so that people are not abusing products. Right? As an example, if you can monitor insulin that is injected into a diabetic patient remotely, that's great. But if it is abused, you could kill a person remotely also. So cybersecurity is another major focus of the industry. And then the third one is what is called human factors or usability engineering. How easy is it to use a given product and design this usability into the product itself. So those are the top we are focused on at our company. We are certainly looking at all those three aspects.
Yeah. Oh, so what you said was just so interesting, but at the same time, scary.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about cybersecurity as one of the things that we need to worry about in this area. So that's amazing. Our audience is made up of a lot of prospective students, people who are maybe doing their undergraduate programs and who are looking into studying further. And they are trying to decide where to study, which country to study. So if a student had to choose a country to study based on the number of jobs available after graduation in biomedical engineering, which would be the country that leads?
I mean, by far, it's the United States. In fact, I mean, I had seen a preview of this question, so I actually looked up to give some factual information, and I looked at the top 15 medical device companies in the world by market cap. Of the top 15, 10 are based out of United States, and of the remaining 5, 2 are US-based companies. As an example, Medtronic is a US-based company, but for some tax advantages and tax reasons, they are registered as an Irish company. So that went into that 5 companies, even though it's actually a US-based company with majority of their employees based in US. So these companies generate a lot of employment. And the other advantage is a lot of these companies, once they become too big, they are not focused on any market area that's less than $1 billion market opportunity. As a result, a lot of engineers and management from these companies actually get out of those large companies and then do a lot of spin-offs where they license technology from the Medtronics, Boston Scientifics of the world, and then stand-up companies. So that generates a lot of startup environment also around these companies. So that's a very key thing because a lot of innovation comes from startup companies. And the US has a lot more of these than any other part of the world.
Thank you. So to the audience, so it's the US hands down. So that's great. Rinda, who are the major companies in this field? Can you name a few?
Sure. Yeah. So you really have to look at what clinical specialty you're looking at, because in any given specialty, they have companies specialized in a set of products, right? So if you look at general cardiac space and diagnostic space, it's Medtronic, Boston Scientific, St. Jude, Abbott. If you look at orthopedic space, it's Zimmer Biomet. If you look at dental space, it's Danaher. Teleflex, Cooper, heart valves is Edwards Lifesciences. So there are several, I would say at least 20 companies that cover the overall spectrum that are very large, each at least $20, $30 billion market cap companies.
That's a lot of good companies. So my next question is to Michael. Michael, do students need a background in biology or pharmacy or medicine to get into biomedical engineering? Obviously also engineering, but what are the kind of students who typically come into our master's programs at USC or even our PhD programs?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier that, so many of the students who come in are engineers already. And nowadays, since there are a lot of biomedical engineering programs for undergraduates, a lot of them are biomedical engineers to start with. But in the past, especially for international students, we have students from EE, electrical engineering, or chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, the major kinds of engineering. I think, I don't see any problems with them catching up with the biology or the physiology background when they come in. On the other hand, students who come from a biology, or maybe a more of a medical background may have a bit more problems in learning the math and the physics as they come in. But people who work hard will always find a way to succeed. So I don't think it's a major problem if you are a smart young person and you're willing to put your hard work into it and learn things.
So, so we are looking more for students with an engineering background. They would be the ones who
engineering background, yeah.
Okay, so
right.
Engineering, what if someone had a chemical engineering background, or maybe a mechanical engineering or a manufacturing engineering, electrical? Or would they be able to transition?
Sure. The basic principles in engineering are quite similar across the board. And so I think it's important for people to understand that when you go for a master's degree, for example, you're not going to be learning the very specifics of that particular technology that you want to work in. So that's the difference between a vocational school and a university like USC, because we try to emphasize more on the basic ideas, the basic concepts, and hammer that into you and how do you solve problems, no matter what specific technology you're going to be working in. So that with that kind of more general background, you're able to move quickly into different kind of areas, because you don't know what kind of job you'll get in the future. And then most of the time you learn the specifics of the job while you're on the job and not before the job. So it's important for you to learn how to learn, basically, and know where to look for things and how to approach problems and be an independent thinker. And that's more important, I think, for a degree like a master's degree or a PhD degree than just learning specific kind of knowledge about a particular field. So I think that's been the mission that we have here at USC, at least.
Actually, this was a question that many of our audience had, so I think they'll be relieved to hear what you had to say. So the next question is for Rinda. Rinda, you have so much experience in the industry. In your opinion, who are the people who get hired, and what are the kinds of skill sets that you look for when you hire?
Yeah, so I'll just echo what Dr. Koo just mentioned, right? We are looking for people who who has the ability to apply what they learned in school or apply the theoretical knowledge. This is what I tell a lot of people when I interview. Information is available even in textbooks, and when I go to library, a lot of information is available. I'm not looking for information. I'm looking for somebody who can take that information and then tell me how they're going to apply that information. The whys and whats and hows are more important. And that's something that USC is really good at developing that aspect, which can then be applied in any different clinical specialty or vertical within biomedical engineering. So I look for people who know how to apply theory, reasoning, understanding why they are doing what they're doing. I always look for people who are passionate about the space, not just as a job, but somebody who looks themselves as having a career in biomedical engineering field and can apply that. Because we are in medical field, attention to detail is extremely important. And then, hardworking, right? I assume some of those things are given, especially when we are starting young in our careers. Can't hear you.
It was me, my mistake. So one of the questions I get asked a bit is, do certifications and online courses help when they're looking for a job?
Yeah, certifications certainly help in understanding the entire business in the space. I myself took several different certifications after I graduated from USC. I started working, and then I took certification programs in clinical trials, regulatory affairs, just medical device development itself at a local university. And they help because when you're working in engineering, you may not necessarily know what clinical department wants from you, right? I mean, you always have to look at who is your customer. As an engineer, we can design everything, we put men on moon, machines on Mars, but you also need to understand who is your customer. My customer in some cases could be clinical, so I need to know what is it that they need. In some instances, it could be regulatory or quality engineers or my customers. So having these certification programs helps you develop that broad knowledge that is very important as you're growing within an organization.
They might also be able to present themselves well at an interview.
Oh, absolutely. If somebody coming in and talks to me about, as an example, a 510K, which is a process used by FDA to get products approved in the United States, as an engineer, if they know that, for me, I'm like, okay, that's great. That's one less thing that I have to worry about as they're finding products for us.
Yeah. All right. So the next question is interesting.
I'd like to add one thing to
Sure.
what Rinda was saying just now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When I came to USC like about 30 years ago, there weren't that many biomedical companies around. And so one of the things that we noticed was that many of our biomedical engineering students got hired in the aerospace companies. And so then when I met to one of the aerospace executives, I asked him why are they hiring biomedical engineering people? So he said that they felt that biomedical engineers, because they have to work with various different disciplines and talk to different people. They're able to work more like systems type of engineers. They can kind of blend together different kinds of knowledge and different types of technologies. And so that was one of the strengths, I guess, of a biomedical engineer, that you're not always specialized in one particular thing, but you're able to be more general and be able to combine things from different disciplines. So that kind of echoes what Rinda was kind of saying just now too.
Yeah, that's great. So the next question is for Rinda, and it's kind of interesting and from an audience. And the question is COVID-19 a boon or a bane for biomedical engineering?
Yeah, I mean, so this is again, first of all, everybody, please continue to wear masks and follow good hygiene and PPE wherever you are. It's very important. If I'm not in this meeting, this is what I would be doing. My whole day and every time I step out, that's what I use. And this is a problem that we are all dealing with real time. As a medical device industry, we are struggling with COVID-19, with a lot of disruptions in supply chain and even people not necessarily testing positive, but anybody who has a symptom, we ask them to self-quarantine. So it is a very difficult and interesting times that we're all living in. But one thing that I can tell you for sure is every aspect of medical device is going to change post-COVID, whether it's a supply chain or regulatory aspects and how we design the product. Everything is going to change. A lot of basic medical devices like ECG monitors, cardiotocograms, pulse oxes, etc., are all wired devices. And now everybody will move into wireless and remote monitoring, and that is going to change no matter what. I mean, all biomedical engineers and medical device professionals will have a huge role in transforming this. Just to give you an idea, I recently had a baby, 1 month old. My wife was in labor and she was connected to all sorts of devices. the first thing after she delivered the baby, she's like, Rinda, I want you to design a that's not wired and everything. I can't even go to the restroom with all these cables and everything. So that is, the problems of the future that will be addressed post-COVID. So in that way, it's a great thing that this will impact in a positive way, make it more accessible to people anywhere in the world.
Well, congratulations to the baby. So yeah, no, I think a lot of new discoveries are going to come as a result of COVID. So definitely, I guess the field of biomedical engineering seems like this is very much needed, and all the companies are going to be busy for a while. So Candace, this question goes to you. Thanks for being patient. I haven't asked you any questions so far. What are you hearing from companies nowadays, from biomedical engineering companies?
In general, or related to COVID, or?
I mean, are they kind of not hiring? Are they having job freezes? Anything like that?
Not to my knowledge. So everything shut down at the university, and for a lot of companies in California, New York, where a lot of our students end up having internships, in mid-March. And so we were still in the middle of our academic semester at the university, and students are thinking about internships May, June. And so that was that prime time, and students were already planning to travel and start their internships for the summer. And luckily, our students were able to retain their internships. They were remote internships, meaning that they were working from home, just like other professionals, but they were still able to work on their projects and get that experience. And so those were experiences with a number of reputable companies, and I could share later on. But there were opportunities that were in Los Angeles, they were in New York, they were in Texas, they were in Redmond, Washington, and the students were able to tap in from wherever they were located and work. In terms of recruitment for the fall, things have not slowed down. So we are going to be virtual. Companies have pulled back on travel. They are not sending representatives out to universities or anywhere, but they are interviewing students just like this. So a big part of training and working with our student population for the fall is, how do you interview in a virtual environment? How do you get your personality as well as your technical expertise to shine in this type of environment? Because this is how students are going to be conducting career fairs, technical interviews, behavioral interviews during at least the fall semester. This might continue for quite some time because, again, many of our companies are still hiring, but they're not physically coming out to universities or even meeting with their corporate partners. They're working in this virtual space. So it's a different environment, but the opportunities are still there.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm sure that it'll be, students will be very relieved to hear that. Yeah. Michael, the next question is for you. And it's from a student who says, I'm interested in biomedical instrumentation and imaging, biomechanics, that is medical device design and development and manufacturing sector of the medical devices. What are the skills that I should develop? So this is the question about skills has been repeatedly been asked by our students. What kind of skill set do they need?
Well, I mean, I think we do
kind
have
of interested before.
Yeah, we do have a master's program in the medical device, and diagnostic devices engineering. So apart from the technical courses like bioinstrumentation and different kinds of engineering type classes that will apply to medical devices, there are courses in that program that deal with like regulations, policy regulations, and the FDA approval process, the legal things, the business kind of. So there are many other things that apply to medical devices, and I think Rinda will be a good person. Need to something industry person.
So, skill sets, what kind of skill sets should students aspire to?
Yeah, the how to process is very important, right? Anything that you learn, how do I apply this is very important. And if you are specializing, let's say, on the mechanical side of things, it's also very important to master skill on used as an example. SolidWorks is often used to design our products. If you're an electrical engineer, or we use OrCAD to do the schematics and layouts. So it's important to understand the foundational aspects of the device, right? Because at the end, you see a very good medical product, but there are a lot more basics that go into it on foundational level on how it's designed, what material is used, and how that material is selected, how to evaluate this material. So the how-tos are very important, and one way to get that while you're in school is to do some internships during college or school, because that's a no penalty way of learning things. At least in academia, if you do something wrong, you get a bad grade. And in internship, yeah, you may not get hired by that company if you do something bad, but at least that's only one company out of 1,000 companies in the space, so that you can go and now show your skill set on what you learned from your internship. So internships are very important. That's where you actually get to practice what you learned in school.
So that's great advice. And you mentioned SolidWorks, SOLID works.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So my next question again is to you, Rinda. So those who are passionate about research and are looking to work in academia, commit time to do a PhD. That's a no-brainer. But if the plan is to get a job in industry, is there any advantage to doing a PhD?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I regret. I didn't spend enough time to do that. But it helps. I mean, it helps them get a domain expertise instead of being in the know on the periphery. You actually deep dive into the technology. In fact, our chief technology officer, who's a co-founder of this company, is a PhD from USC, and this whole company that I'm part of right now is developed based on his PhD work that he did at USC, which subsequently we licensed from a foundation and then started this company. So it's very important and also very rewarding if you have the patience and perseverance to do a PhD.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So thank you so much. And the next question, Candice, is for you. And so are the jobs in the US companies that we talked about, will they hire international students, or are there any citizenship requirements?
Well, for BME, there's definitely hiring. I looked at our recruitment calendar for last year, and from job postings to attendees at the career fair to coming to campus to interview, we had 104 companies last year alone hiring F1 students who were majoring and completing degrees in biomedical engineering. So it's a good amount of companies who stepped foot on our campus to recruit our students. There are other companies that are sending postings and others, and they just physically might not come to USC, but that shows a strong faith in hiring students, both from the United States, but also from outside.
So actually, the next few questions are going to be for you, Candice. So maybe I will go ahead and share your slides so that you can talk about them. And while I'm doing that, maybe you can start answering the question about what it is that USC does to help students find jobs.
Absolutely. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. Absolutely. So it's very unique that you'll notice that many universities have career centers, and those are groups of individuals that will help you through the recruitment into full-time positions, internship positions, and co-op. But what's unique is the School of Engineering has a Career Connections office within engineering. So this is in addition to the Career Center that's also at USC. The School of Engineering at USC is actually the only engineering school in the nation, in the United States, that has a unique engineering career center. So this is something very unique, where companies are coming just to meet with their engineering students. So I pulled some information just from last year to share, just so you could have an understanding of what this recruitment and career readiness life cycle looks like at USC and some of the activities. So last year alone, we had around 4,500 postings for our students. And so postings would be job opportunities where multiple students could be hired for the same job. And so last year we had that number. We had 195 unique organizations actively recruiting. That's where an organization from a company is inside of a booth shaking hands and meeting students. This is not the primary recruitment tool, but it is something that many students are familiar with because that fair environment is something you've probably participated in before. We also have something called Trojan Talks, and I'm seeing some blinking. I want to make sure that everyone can hear me. There are some Trojan Talks, and Trojan Talks are information sessions where companies will come and speak for around 45 minutes to an hour about opportunities within their organization. And so that's a very, very great way to network and just understand the opportunities within an organization, really to see if they're a fit for you. In terms of signature and events and workshops, we don't expect students to know how to find a job when you start your education at USC or any institution. It's its own world. So that's what this team really helps you with. So they hold a number of workshops, everything from understanding an internship and what is curricular practical training. That is what a student who's an F1 student needs to understand. There's so many nuances and rules. So our team tries to demystify it and just make it as easy as possible for students to connect and find those internship opportunities. Some other workshops include recruiting in a virtual environment, developing your resume, your CV, your cover letter. How do you navigate the job search? How do you market yourself? Because you're in a room with people who are in the same degree program as you. You're from the same institution. You've taken the same classes. How do you stand out? How do you communicate what you've learned in the classroom or in projects or internship experiences to someone like Rinda who's hiring? So that is a big part of the conversation with recruitment. And finally, just evaluating job offers. It's a wonderful conversation to have with students because you have choices and there are multiple organizations. And so understanding your fit and what works for you. There are a number of special events like the How to Get Hired series. For our graduate students, we have a whole week called Graduate Career Readiness, just of boot camp-like sessions and meetings with advisors so you understand what recruitment means. So this week actually takes place between orientation and the start of classes. So we know, instead of just going to Target and picking up items for your apartment, you could actually start to think about the job search before you begin your first set of classes. And then there are a number of other events that organizations sponsor. So we work with companies and organizations to make sure you get in front of the people that will be hiring you and working with you early in the process. So they host, we work with them in hosting networking events, breakfast, luncheons, coffee chats, their tech talks, understanding technology in an area, career panels just like this with individuals who are now working in your field, and then challenges that are based on discipline, but really just things that our corporate partners have said they would like to connect with their students on. So that's a snapshot of the year, but there's many connection points for our students.
Okay. So can you guys hear me? Candace, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so I'm having trouble sharing the screen. So what we are going to do is maybe provide this information to the participants and we will share it with them. And then what we will do is I was just kind of going through the slides myself and maybe I can ask you a few questions.
And I could see them, Sudha, so it's visible.
Okay. Oh, it is visible. That's wonderful. Okay. So then hopefully everybody can see it as well. So you want me to move to this slide or the next one?
This slide's really just a snapshot for biomedical. So like hiring students and are full-time, and we're 78 unique postings for students, F1 students within BME disciplines. 12 of those companies attended our fair and 20 of those companies hosted evening information sessions. So those were companies that, again, were hiring our F1 students with biomedical discipline backgrounds.
Okay.
And then the next slides is really just a snapshot of, again, with the past year, some of the organizations and companies that were on campus and have hired our students. So the text might be a bit small, but feel free to scroll through. And this is just last year. Every year the list changes and hopefully continues to expand.
So yeah, that's a pretty impressive list. So tell us about this particular slide.
Okay, so one thing that's unique, and you'll notice when you different college campuses, so we're not a placement office, meaning we make the connections, we get you in front of the companies, but once you find that opportunity, there's no requirement that you let us know, but we continue to ask because we want to know where you end up. And so there is something called this first destination survey where we ask students when they graduate what their new titles will be, what their salaries are, just information like that. And so these are some shared position titles for students at the end of last year. Now, again, we were in the middle of a pandemic, so our response rate was not as high as usual, but these were just some of the titles for BME students who are graduating and where the titles they were given. So some of them very traditional, biomedical engineer, a number of systems engineers, senior associate scientists, research associates, and these were students who weren't necessarily PhD students, research associates with master's degrees, regulatory affairs specialists. So these are just some repeating titles that some of our graduates were able to share with us.
That's wonderful. So when I looked at the list of companies, I happened to see companies like Cisco. What are they doing hiring biomedical engineers?
Well, Dr. Koo kind of teased this early on when he was talking about aerospace and defense. So sometimes you're in a program and you might not realize that a company that's very different could be hiring for people in your field. So a few years ago, and it might have been last year, and I think it's a few years ago, Hewlett Packard was hiring a number of biomedical engineers, and they were working in digital printing space for and I'm going to butcher this, so I know our BME experts are going to get mad at me. But they were actually working on 3D printing for hospitals and medical facilities. So this was an HP space, but they were like, we only want to meet with BME students. And we're like, really? What about your traditional students that you always interview? They're like, no, this is a new project that we're working on and we want biomedical students. And so sometimes it's a unique project or area that they're working on. And sometimes it's a propensity to think a certain way. So they might not have a job that relates to BME within that company, but the way a biomedical engineer thinks and approaches problems might be what they're looking for within their organization. And so that's also another reason why you might see a company that you might not think is hiring biomedical engineers, they might be looking for that skill set, that way of innovative thinking that a BME student would bring to the organization.
Yeah. So actually that brings me to the point that a good career center within a university is very valuable, because why is a student even going to think of applying to Hewlett Packard, right? So, so being in touch with your career center in your college would be a very, very important thing for you to do. So another question.
If I may. Yeah, so just to follow up on what Candice was saying, actually one of my PhD students who graduated earlier in the year, he was hired by Facebook. Although, I mean, because he did a project in artificial intelligence way to kind of analyze some physiological signals, and they found that was interesting. So they hired him to be in their AI kind of section. So he's applying his skills now to other things besides biomedical. So, but that's he got a good job though. So
wonderful. That's great. Yeah, right. That's really good to hear. So the next question is again for Candice. How should a student approach a company for internships and for projects or jobs?
There are many ways to approach. I think, first off, if you're at a university like USC and you have these connection points, participate in them early on, meaning start from the very beginning. Start understanding the organization, do your homework, and make sure that you present yourself so you actually seem like a fit to the organization. I also highly recommend, just by going to these workshops, you would learn how to distinguish yourself from other students, not only at USC, but at all the other universities studying your field. Really, if you approach a company after doing your homework, and I always say that, you should understand the organization in which you're having the conversation, approach them with a curiosity, but also being able to explain to them what your fit would be. And this is a whole process. It's definitely not a 30-second piece of advice, but there are some companies that don't like to be approached. And we know that. They tell us. They're like, no, we deal with recs. I don't want someone coming up to me. If I'm not on your campus, that means we're not having conversations. We can help guide you. We understand the cultures of a number of these organizations and what has worked well and what their representatives on a number of our boards have recommended to find positions within their companies.
I can actually speak to that also, Candice.
Yes.
It is very important to be in touch and make sure you use all the resources at the Career Center. I'm Exhibit A. Apart from our manufacturing and sales, we have about 100 people in a technical side, and at least 10 of them are from USC. And when I get resumes, just by looking at the resume, I can tell whether that person used the Career Center services or not. Just as an example, the action verbs that the list PDF you give, I mean, I can see just like 2 words in the resume, yeah, this person did not use the services, may not have spent as much time in preparing for this, right? So that gives me a very quick impression. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, now, at 15 years, I've been used to interviewing people that way. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's great. So another question is, if you're a PhD student, how do you structure your job search? So I'm assuming this particular student wants to get into industry and not into academia.
I'll just jump in. It's pretty much the same process, but what I would recommend, and we always would recommend this with our PhD students, when you want to lead with your research, because that is something that you're bringing to the table that's very different. So any of the research projects that you've led or you've worked on, there's a specific way of writing this in your CV. Like Rinda said, this is your calling card. This is the first piece of paper that they're going to look at before they actually get in front of you. So how you're able to represent that research and the active role that you've had in that research and how that could possibly translate to success within the organization is huge. Now, a good number of our doctoral students end up working in R&D for companies if industry is their path. But if you're open to doing other things, that's something that you might want to state in your CV that, maybe you are open to working in research and development or other areas, and explain what that is, because you as a doctoral student, you need to connect the dots a bit to explain why you might want to make this transition to industry versus academia or traditional research if you don't want to work in the R&D space.
Fantastic. So USC Viterbi has one of the US's top biomedical engineering departments, and they offer a bunch of courses. So I thought it would be a good idea to kind of go through each of these master's courses and ask Dr. Koo to comment briefly on each of them. So what I'm going to do is first go through this, and then we will go back and take a few more audience questions. So Dr. Koo, the first course that we have is a general MS in biomedical engineering. Right? Can you see my slides?
On the screen?
I'm trying to show it, but I'm having trouble sharing screens for some reason.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that's our general master's program, and I think it's the one it's most flexible in the sense that you take a number of units, and most of them you have to satisfy some core classes. But besides that, it's quite flexible in terms of what you want to take. So it caters to your interests and your career goals to some extent. So then it's just a matter of talking with your advisor or about what your interests are and whether those courses would satisfy the being counted as part of the program. So that's the most flexible one, I think, and most people go for that program.
Yeah. Right. And the next one that you have is MS in biomedical engineering, biomedical data science. I guess this is one of our newer programs.
Yeah, that was just approved earlier this year, and then it's becoming official starting this fall. Since it's just recently announced, so that sticks so much interest now in artificial intelligence and machine learning and that's all things, and so that allows you to study how, for example, those kinds of concepts and those applications can be applied to, biomedical situations, looking at signals and looking at, deducing not just using it to look at data itself, but also understanding how does it, what's the context in which you get the results and how do you compare it with what you can understand about the physiological system. Kind of interpreting it is one part of it as well. But that's a new program. That's right.
That's wonderful. So I guess the third program that we have is a MS in Biomedical Engineering, Medical Imaging, and Imaging Informatics.
Yes, that focuses, as the name suggests, on imaging, but not just imaging itself, but imaging. You get a lot of data from imaging, images that have to be put together in databases. And so this involves quite a bit of, in a sense, computer science, a little bit of that in terms of how do you compact those images and kind of put them into a database that can be used by the hospital or by clinicians. So there are courses that deal with that particular networking and the kind of classification of images and so on.
Okay. And then there is another exciting MS program on neuroengineering.
Yes, that allows you to kind of specialize a bit more on the neuro side of things. So we have some courses on implant engineering, but you can also take more courses on neurobiology, neuroscience. So that allows you, the time to kind of look at both the physiology, the biology, as well as the engineering part of the neuroengineering.
Well, that's fantastic. I think all of these programs sound super interesting. But if a student is not sure about a specialization, then maybe they can take the biomedical engineering, the general program, the one you talked about the first.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you can also transfer from to another if you change your mind later on. And in fact, I mean, with the general masters, you can even take the classes that one of the more specialized ones take as well. So it's quite flexible in terms of how you deal with things.
Right. And also you allow people to switch from one program to another within the department if they are not.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's great. So if anybody wants to find out more about any of these programs, you can go to our website, which is uscengineer.com. Ray and Divangna, if you can just kind of put in the URL in the chat box, that would be great. We have a whole bunch of other audience questions. Candace, the next question is for you. What are the salary scales like in the US and Canada? You may not know about Canada, but what are the salary scales like in the US?
Well, I did share earlier, we ask that information of students. So it's what's reported, and it's a small N. So I always mention that because it's not a list from all of our students. But one of the average salaries that we received, and unfortunately, it actually is skewing more with undergraduate feedback. We didn't get a lot of graduate student feedback. And so that was around an average of 80,000 base. But again, that's a different degree type, and it's a very small N. So not a lot of people responded. So I'm actually, I don't feel that is the best way to make that decision. I would recommend for students who have that question, there are many online resources like the National Association for Colleges and Employers, NACE, and I could put this in the chat. They actually aggregate this first destination student across survey across the nation. And so they do have an average of salaries by discipline reported by institution. So I'll share that. That's public information. I also know that Burning Glass collects a lot of that data as well. So I would recommend that is more of a source versus placement information that is not required for students to send to us. I hope that makes sense.
That's true. Maybe Rinda has something to add to that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent. I think 80 to 100 grand, depending on skill set, on average.
Okay. All right. So the next question is either for Rinda or for Dr. Koo. What is the scope of automation and robotics in biomedical engineering? Rinda, you want to go first?
A lot of companies are working on it right now. Intuitive Surgical comes to mind. Google, with a partnership with J&J, started another company called Verb, which is all robotic surgery systems. So a lot of new products are being developed in that space.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Koo?
Yeah, so as Brenda was saying, those are the companies that you mentioned are the major ones in that space. At USC, for example, the computer science department has quite a very strong robotics team as well, and there are some projects going on which deal with more medical related kind of projects. So I mean, you could also if you come to USC, for example, you can kind of work on a way in which you can do a project, with the robotics group there. We do have a faculty member who works on the hand of Dr. Francisco Valero Cuevas. He uses robotics principles, and some of the students are doing robotic-like applications for rehabilitation of the hand and biomechanical kinds of applications.
Okay. So, Candice, can you see this particular slide with your staff? Maybe not?
I can.
Okay, so maybe you just want to say something about this particular slide.
It's just the faces of the team. I mean, they're available and there for you. It's just who's there. These are individuals who are career professionals, many of them award recognized by the National Association for Colleges and Employers. So I'm very proud of them. But they have really developed some unique programming for our students, engineering students, and are actually leaders in this area at the university, even though they're not part of the Central Career Center. So if you enroll at USC, you'd be able to work with them directly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Candice. So the next question is, it's kind of a tough question for us to answer, but it says, what are the best universities to do a master's in biomedical engineering? Well, I guess we are biased, but truly, I think the USC Viterbi has a wonderful biomedical engineering program. So definitely take a look at what we are doing. The next question is, can biotechnology be infused into biomedical engineering? Dr. Koo?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, some of my colleagues actually are doing, they come from a chemical engineering background, so they use more biochemistry and more microbiology in terms of their research. So in a way, there's a bit of overlap, I would say, between biomedical engineering and biotechnology in that particular kind of special areas. So yes, I mean there is overlap, and it's just that the applications that we have are more geared towards medical applications. And as I mentioned before, biotechnology, you can have all kinds of agricultural, food-related things that people are using biotechnology techniques with. And so, but if you're more towards the medical area, then there is certainly an overlap between biotechnology and biomedical engineering. It's just a matter of the semantics involved in naming this and that.
Okay. One member of the audience wants to know, what are some brain-computer interface companies? Do we know any?
I think I do know a few, but it's just I don't have it at the top of my head right now. Blanking up. I think Rinda would probably know it better than I do.
Yeah. The newest company that is in a lot of news these days is Neurolink by Elon Musk from Tesla. One company, but even the large companies are all working in that. So NeuroPace is another company that's out of Bay Area that has done actually a product that's approved. and Medtronic obviously is working in that space. So,
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So I think we've come to the end of the questions that I have. Divangna, can you hear us? Okay. So I think this has actually been a very, very interesting session. I'm hoping that the students found it very helpful. Those of the audience, if you found this very interesting, please just leave a message in the chat site telling us that you liked it. We are running out of time, so it's been a good 1 hour. And it went pretty fast. We've had a few audio issues, but hopefully that has not stopped you from getting all the information that you needed. So we will sign off at this point, but my thanks to Rinda and to Michael and to Candice for sharing your valuable time. And these kind of sessions are really important because they kind of give the information that is really not available to students in one place. So to hear from academicians and industry leaders is really, really a great treat for all of us. Thank you all. I appreciate all of you taking the time to attend. We do have our next session will be on machine learning and data science. So this will be careers in machine learning and data science on August 5th. So please do join us, register for it and join us if you are able to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudha.
Thank you.
thank you all. Good luck.
All right.
Good luck.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys can sign. Thank you. Okay. Hey, Divangna.